What if the greatest threat to medieval Christianity wasn't Satan himself, but women who dared to heal with herbs and speak to the old gods? Why did the church mobilize armies against midwives while negotiating with demons? Why were witch trials more vicious than exorcisms? And why did bishops who claimed to battle the devil spend more gold hunting wise women than fighting actual demonic possession? Deep in the Vatican's secret archives lie documents that reveal a truth the church never wanted anyone to discover: that their war against witches wasn't about protecting souls from damnation, but about protecting power from an ancient threat that predated Christ himself. Today, we descend into the shadowed history where mythology meets religious terror, where the sacred feminine became the ultimate heresy. Welcome to ancient underworld, where gods fall, monsters rise, and devils whisper through the shadows of forgotten myths. If you enjoy exploring the dark side of mythology, like this video, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another forgotten tale. In the candlelit chambers where church doctrine was forged, scribes wrote of witches not as servants of Satan, but as something far more dangerous, inheritors of a power that existed before the first cathedral stone was laid. The Malleus Maleficarum, that infamous manual of witch hunting, reveals more in what it fears than what it condemns. These weren't women who worshipped the devil, they were women who carried the blood memory of gods the church thought it had buried forever. Sister Catherine discovered this truth in a crumbling monastery outside Prague in 1487, her trembling hands uncovering parchments hidden beneath rotting floorboards. The ancient texts spoke of the old knowing, the ways of Hecate, the Greek goddess of crossroads and magic, whose torches once lit the path between life and death. But who was Hecate before she became a demon? Furthermore, she read of women who could call upon Circe's transformative powers, who channeled the moon's phases exactly as the ancient priestesses of Diana had done for centuries. The yellowed pages told stories that chilled her to the bone, descriptions of women who weren't devil worshippers, but something infinitely more threatening to church authority. They were the living remnants of religions that had ruled Europe's spiritual landscape for millennia before Christ's name was whispered. Additionally, the church's own sealed records, locked away from prying eyes, documented encounters with women who displayed powers that predated Christian miracles. Could these abilities truly come from Satan if they existed before Satan was even feared? They healed with knowledge passed down through bloodlines that stretched back to stone circles and sacred groves, spoke with spirits that had names older than angels, and performed rituals where ancient gods still stirred beneath Christian soil. In the sacred feminine traditions, women held direct connection to the divine without need for priests, bishops, or papal intercession. They were their own conduits to the supernatural, their own interpreters of divine will. What could be more dangerous to a church than women who needed no intermediary? Consequently, in that independence lay the seeds of the church's deepest terror: women who needed no permission to touch the sacred. Brother Marcus felt his world crack when he translated a letter from Cardinal Torriani in 1486. The parchment brittled between his fingers as he deciphered words that would haunt him forever. The cardinal wrote not of demonic corruption, but of women who heal where our prayers fail, who speak truth where our doctrine stumbles, who hold sway over hearts we cannot touch. The revelation struck Marcus with devastating clarity: the witch wasn't the church's theological enemy. She was its practical competitor. Across medieval Europe, a devastating pattern emerged that kept church leaders awake at night. When children fell ill, mothers didn't first run to the priest, they ran to the wise woman. When crops failed, when livestock died, when unexplainable misfortune struck, peasants sought the counsel of herbalists and cunning folk whose knowledge actually worked. Nevertheless, these women understood anatomy, botany, psychology, and astronomy in ways that seminary-trained priests could not match. Their wisdom tested by generations of desperate need. They delivered babies while priests could only offer prayers, set bones while bishops preached about divine suffering, treated infections with herbs that saved lives while church doctrine offered only last rites. Where was God's power when people needed actual healing? The common people witnessed miracles in crumbling cottages that rivaled anything happening in grand cathedrals. What's more, a midwife who could ease childbirth commanded more reverence than a bishop who declared pain was God's will. Which would desperate parents choose, empty prayers or effective remedies? Even more threatening was their independence from every structure the church had built to control access to the divine. These women answered to no pope, required no ordination, and needed no cathedral to practice their craft. They inherited their power through bloodlines and training that bypassed Christian authority entirely. As a result, they were living proof that Christianity wasn't the only path to supernatural effectiveness, and often it wasn't even the best one. Before we dive deeper into this forbidden history, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Ancient Underworld, and turn on that notification bell. What we're about to uncover will challenge everything you were taught about medieval Christianity, and you won't want to miss how this story ends. Father Johannes Nider's private letters, discovered centuries later sealed within a monastery vault, expose the calculated propaganda campaign that would reshape European spirituality forever. "We cannot simply forbid them," he wrote to a fellow inquisitor in 1435, his quill scratching urgently across parchment. "For the people love them too well. We must instead make the people fear them more than they fear damnation itself." The transformation that followed was as brilliant as it was brutal, a masterwork of religious warfare that would make modern propagandists weep with envy. The church weaponized existing fears of the devil to create an entirely new mythology, that witches gained their power through demonic pacts. Ancient goddesses became demons overnight. Traditional herbalism became maleficia, and healing rituals became satanic rites. Hecate's torches became Satan's flames. Circe's transformations became demonic possession, and Diana's moon worship became midnight orgies with devils. Heinrich Kramer and James Sprenger didn't simply write the Malleus Maleficarum, they rewrote history itself, turning priestesses into prostitutes of Satan, healers into harbingers of damnation, and wise women into wicked servants of hell. Page after page, they constructed a new reality where every herb gathered by moonlight was a demonic sacrament. Every successful healing was evidence of satanic intervention. Every woman who dared claim spiritual authority was proof of infernal corruption. Was this theology or marketing? But here's the twist. The most insidious element of this campaign was how it inverted the truth. The church convinced Europe that witches served the devil, when in reality the church feared witches because they didn't need the devil, or God, or priests, or any Christian framework to access supernatural power. The persecution wasn't about protecting Christianity from Satan. It was about protecting Christian authority from competing spiritual systems that actually delivered results. Every burned healer eliminated a rival to priestly power. Every tortured cunning woman removed a challenge to church authority. Therefore, the witch trials weren't religious purification. They were spiritual warfare designed to exterminate an entire cosmology that threatened Christian monopoly on the sacred. In the mythology that emerged from this spiritual warfare, we discover echoes that reach back to the very beginning of religious authority itself. The witch became another iteration of the monstrous feminine that patriarchal religions have always feared. The Medusa whose gaze turns men to stone, the Lilith who refuses to submit, the Eve who seeks forbidden knowledge. Each of these figures represents the same terrifying concept to established religious power: feminine spiritual autonomy. Medusa's serpent hair connects her to ancient earth wisdom and euphonic power that predates Olympian gods, her deadly gaze representing knowledge that destroys comfortable illusions. Similarly, Lilith's rebellion against Adam embodies rejection of male spiritual authority. Her refusal to lie beneath him, a symbol of women claiming equal access to divine power. The witch's knowledge of herbs and healing represents direct access to sacred forces without male intermediation, her very existence proof that spiritual authority need not flow through institutional channels. In sacred feminine traditions worldwide, women have always served as primary conduits between mortal and divine realms, as oracles speaking prophecy, as priestesses conducting sacred rites, as shamans journeying between worlds, as healers channeling restorative power. Why did these traditions terrify institutional religion so deeply? The Church's war against witches was simply the Christian iteration of a much older conflict between institutional religion and indigenous spiritual practices, between hierarchical authority and personal spiritual autonomy. Today's fascination with witchcraft isn't really about spells and potions. It's about reclaiming spiritual self-determination in a world still dominated by religious institutions. Modern witchcraft movements, from Wicca to feminist spirituality, represent the same threat to religious authority that medieval wise women posed. They offer direct spiritual experience without institutional gatekeepers, personal power without priestly permission, sacred connection without denominational dogma. The Church feared witches more than the devil because the devil, in Christian theology, was ultimately subordinate to God's plan, his rebellion already defeated at Calvary. Witches represented something far more subversive, the possibility that God's plan wasn't the only game in town, that spiritual power could be accessed through entirely different systems that owed Christianity nothing. As we emerge from this journey through the shadowed corridors of religious history, one truth becomes undeniably clear. The Church's war against witches was never about protecting souls from damnation. It was about protecting an institution from competition, about maintaining a monopoly on spiritual power in a world where ancient wisdom still whispered through the darkness. The witch trials weren't evidence of Christian righteousness triumphing over satanic evil. They were evidence of a young religion desperately trying to erase the memory of older, more feminine ways of touching the divine. Indeed, perhaps the greatest magic the witches possessed wasn't the ability to curse or heal, but the ability to reveal the Church's deepest insecurity. That their authority was constructed, not divinely ordained. Maybe witches weren't the Church's enemy at all. Maybe they were its mirror, reflecting back a truth the Church couldn't bear to acknowledge, that spiritual power belongs to no institution, answers to no hierarchy, and flows through channels far older and more mysterious than any cathedral can contain. Who else did the Church try to silence in its quest for spiritual monopoly? What other ancient wisdoms were burned in the fires of institutional fear? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this forbidden history has opened your eyes to truths they never wanted you to discover, make sure you're subscribed to Ancient Underworld with notifications turned on. The old gods are stirring, and their secrets demand to be unveiled.